This is the Sandman podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we're discussing the Sandman Chapter 7, The Doll's House.
Hello, Rosie. Come in, my butterfly. You are at a crossroads, Rose Walker.
How do you know my name? Who are you?
Names. Each name is but a single aspect of the whole. Be satisfied with the trinity you have, love. You wouldn't want to meet us as the kindly ones. We can only caution you, sister. We can't protect you.
Protect me from...
From life, my posy. And the things that hover beyond life, thrashing their selves against it. Beware dreams. And houses.
What do you mean?
You've asked the wrong question. Had you asked the right one, we could have warned you. Against the Corinthian. Told you about Chet. And about Morpheus.
Welcome back, fellow dreamers. This is TV Podcast Industries, and we're discussing the Sandman Chapter 7, The Doll's House. No, not the Joss Whedon show that ran for like 2 or 3 seasons that was really good, but like critically panned and everyone hated it. No, not that one. No, Sandman Chapter 7, exclusively on Netflix. Yes, that good one. I am one of your hosts, Chris.
I am one of your hosts, Derek. I also like The Doll's House.
Hello there, fellow dreamers. I am the third and final host, John. I also really enjoyed Joss Whedon's The Dollhouse.
It was good, isn't it?
Yeah. It was a good show. And it went some places that you just didn't think it would. Especially in season 2.
Yeah,
it was one of those
they did that ending to try and get a third season where they set it 5 years in the future, and it was like, this is amazing. I hope they get the show so they can get to that point. Oh no, it's been cancelled.
Yeah. That happens a lot. It's like, oh no, this is amazing. It's been cancelled.
Oh well. Hopefully that doesn't happen to the Sandman. We are just around that point where apparently Netflix are making their decision as to whether we're going to get a season 2 of Sandman. Do you know why it's so complicated to make this decision? Because it is one of the most expensive shows that Warner Brothers have made, and they really have to hit very high numbers, even though it's been number 1 and number 2 for the entire month in most countries around the world for Netflix. They are apparently lots of questions over whether they're going to be able to afford a second season of The Sandman. So it'll be interesting. Hopefully we'll get an answer before we finish our coverage of The Sandman.
Hopefully so. Like, to be fair, they've cancelled a lot of other shows. Just making way for it. It's like, we need that 5 million from here, and this 10 million from here, and this other 50 million from here. And that's one episode. Yeah. No, hopefully we will find out. But we're not here to talk about the future of potential season 2. We're here to talk about Chapter 7, The Doll's House, because this was one I was waiting for. This begins to set up what I think is one of the more interesting arcs of the kind of first 2 volumes of the Sandman, where we do get the discussion of a convention, if you will, a gathering, a soiree of like-minded people, as well as a very interesting domicile. Being all smashed together, and I was like, I was interested to see how this was going to play out. So we can discuss as we get into it, into our kind of wrap up our review, our discussion, if you will, of this episode. But before we get any further, should we jump into who, what, where, and how? Who gave us what, Derek, on this episode?
Absolutely, yeah. The executive producer of the show, again, are Alan Heinberg, Neil Gaiman, and David S. Goyer. This episode was written by Heather Bellson. She's written 4 episodes of The Walking Dead and also wrote 2 episodes of Neil Gaiman's American Gods series as well, which is a pretty good series. Unfortunately, it kind of went on a little bit too long. They kind of went round in circles a little bit on American Gods and then ended off not finishing it. And it always kind of annoys a lot of fans, because if they just kept to the story of the book, they would have told the entire narrative in the 4 seasons they had. And unfortunately, it never got finished. So we all have still got the books to read, at least. But it was a really good show when it was on form.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Season 1 was excellent.
Yeah, I'm with John. Season 1 was excellent. Yeah. I'm not going to lie, I kind of kind of snoozed out after, I think it was like midway of season 2.
Right.
I think as well, losing the showrunner again.
Brian Fuller.
With Brian Fuller, who don't know what it is. I really love his stuff, but then doesn't seem to, dare I say it, follow through to the end, whether it's creative differences, personal differences. It's a real shame because I love his aesthetic. I love his style. I love how he's adapted, like with Hannibal. Oh, yeah. Like with American Gods and then
Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah. Yep. So it's a strange one, but season 1 was just absolutely excellent.
Yeah.
Would you say that Brian Fuller doesn't live up to his fullest potential?
I guess that is one way you could say it, yes.
Thank you for placating me.
There you go. Excellent, excellent. But go check out American Gods. All episodes are available on Prime Video to watch. 4 seasons there. There's some lush stuff in there. Go check it out. Worth a gander anyway if you're looking for something after you finish Sandman. This episode was directed by Andrés Baiz. He directs this and episode 8 and previously directed episodes of Narcos and Narcos Mexico for Netflix.
Great stuff.
That is a pedigree, but it was a strange one when I read it. I was like, interesting. Wasn't expecting that.
Netflix directors tend to stay on board for other Netflix shows, as we've seen from some of the other shows that we've covered. John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for Sandman Chapter 7, The Doll's House?
Sure. In 2015, Rose Walker and her brother Jed are separated when their parents divorce. 6 years later, following the death of both parents, Rose attempts to locate Jed and claim legal guardianship, but Jed is instead placed in the foster home system. At the same time, Rose is flown to England accompanied by her friend and neighbour Lyta Hall to meet Unity Kincaid, a wealthy recovered victim of sleep sickness who is interested in her ancestry. Unity reveals that she is Rose's biological great-grandmother and offers to fund Rose's search for Jed. Rose and Lyta travel to Florida to continue their search for Jed, where they are watched by Matthew the Raven, who reports his findings back to Lucien. But unknown to Rose, she is also of huge interest to Morpheus, the Corinthian, and Desire, as she is a dream vortex, a being who naturally attracts and manipulates dreams. Desire conspires with her twin sister Despair to use Rose against Morpheus in another one of her plots against her sibling. Meanwhile, the Corinthian is hunting Rose for his own ends, as together he believes Rose and him can put Morpheus out of business for good. But the Corinthian is also being hunted by 3 collectors, who want him to be the guest of honour for a collectors' convention. Aware of Rose's nature, and following a census of the dreaming by Lucien, Morpheus plans to use her to track 3 errant residents of the dreaming, Galt, the Corinthian, and Fiddler's Green, who are still at large. However, while Morpheus and Lucien are able to track Rose, they are unable to locate her brother Jed in either the dreaming or the waking world. Lucien and Morpheus deduce that the rogue dream Galt has severed Jed's consciousness from the dreaming. As they discuss what should be done, Rose approaches Lucien and Morpheus in the dreaming for assistance in finding her brother.
Excellent. A brand new arc for the Sandman here.
Yes. And as I kind of alluded to, as I straight out said, this is one I've been waiting for. Because I enjoyed these. So should we dive straight into our spoiler-filled discussion? If you're only joining us in episode 7, welcome to episode 7 of our coverage of the Sandman. But you know how it goes, ladies and gents and fellow dreamers. We get in, we talk, we discuss our top moments, and we're going to go through it from top to bottom and ins and outs and lefts and rights. So should we just straight up, let's jump in and discuss Desire and Despair.
Yes, definitely. 2 more of the endless. We've met Desire so far this season, but haven't met Despair before.
Yeah.
I love this scene. I really love Desire. I love how they're being played in this show. It's this really manipulative. I think one of our pieces of feedback said compared Desire to Loki, and I was kind of intrigued by that. But Desire here is shown to be really manipulative, and it seems to be even more plain than I remember reading it in the comic books. It's really clear that they're the one that's been involved since the beginning. They're the one that has caused all of Sandman's problems, all of Morpheus's problems, from right back to Nada, whose story we don't know in full in the show yet, but Nada was the woman that Morpheus met when he went to hell, and also involved in Roderick Burgess' capture of Morpheus back in the 1920s. So very interesting that we have Desire here admitting to all of this and setting up another new scheme to try and trap her brother.
Yeah. For me, you're right. In the comic books, I don't remember it being as in your face. Mm-hmm. I think it was alluded to, and it was kind of like, it could have been Desire. They might have been the person doing it, or the Endless doing it. There was other possibilities, because there are still other Endless we have not been, or had not been, or at this point as well in the show and in the comic books, had not been introduced to. Yeah. You're like, oh, it could be them. And here I think they're jumping straight into here's one of your bad guys, so who else is who is the Grandmaster, who is the one pulling the strings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think I'm really okay with that, because Mason Alexander Park is really, they are really kind of playing this version of Desire to a point where I'm like, yeah, okay, you've nailed what I remember, that essence of who that character was. 100%. And you're kind of just doing it in a way where I was like, cool, I'm happy to see more and more scenes with this character and this actor.
Yeah.
On top, we also then get to meet Despair, which is always a fun one.
Yes, Despair is really interesting. I like her.
I love this. I actually want to see more of Desire. I think there's not been enough of them on the screen, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Really enjoyed Desire. Like that you get a little bit more insight into why she's been behind Nada and Burgess and wants to now involve Rose Walker as well, because she's effectively pulling everything in the dream world including Morpheus, so he will be drawn to her as much as all the other dreams and nightmares.
Yes.
I might be taking it simplistically, but in effect it's almost like it's a power thing, but based around jealousy.
Yes.
That they think that Dream is smug and believes his own realm to be better than ours, and love when Desire says, but he must learn that dreams are echoes of Desire. So I love how all these different parts of the Endless, like we saw how Morpheus escaped Lucifer and hell with the notion that dreams are what give hell its power. Mm-hmm. Here we have Desire saying that dreams really are echoes of Desire. So I really like that, but I just actually want to see more. And I thought Despair, I mean, apart from the wrinkles, was just like granny clothes, just really good. And I thought it was just the touch of her using her hook sigil, just to sort of create a big gash in her cheek as well. I thought that was slightly sort of just disturbing because it just happened. It was like her sort of biting her nails or something. That's what Despair does. It's just constantly despairing, I guess.
Exactly. Really, really interesting to see these two characters on screen. Again, we will see them in the future, but both of them are the manipulators behind and are working together. And again, it's not just a name. They are the personifications of Desire and Despair. So that's why they are the driving force behind what's going on. So really good.
Yep, and we've met, just to recap, we have met Death, we have met now Desire and Despair, we've obviously met Dream, so there are other Endless beginning with the answers on the back of the postcard. If you've never seen the show and watched the comic books, don't spoil it for other people, but like there's definitely, I remember, Derek, you kind of coming up a long time ago about telling that story about how you were trying to figure out who the wayward sibling was.
The prodigal, yes.
And that's referenced again here by Despair, thinking it's to do with the prodigal.
Yeah.
Not another, as she says, another machination of desire to somehow ensnare or play with Dream.
Yeah. I love how excited Despair gets for a second, thinking, oh, we have real news about the prodigal and where they could possibly have gone. And I just, if you do pause for a second, or for fans of the comics who know who the Endless are, you can see the sigils of each of the members of the Endless that we will probably meet in the show, except for the prodigal. The prodigal's sigil, the symbol of what they are, is missing. Whereas if you look at all the rest of them, they're really clear what they're representing, I think. Especially if you're a fan of a comic book, you can see which sigil is for which of the Endless. So, and there's one I particularly love in there, which we'll hopefully see if we get a season 2. You know what I mean, Chris, don't you?
I have no idea what you're talking about. I will plead the fifth. No, that's the wrong show we're covering. The lawyer shows are on Thursdays.
That's right. She-Hulk.
Marvel,
yes.
She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. Right, no. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing, and I'm hoping we maybe get some more. Maybe we get one of the other Endless before at least the end of the season.
I feel like this is it, because I feel like this, well, I know this storyline is the Doll's House from now until episode 10. So I don't think we're going to meet any more of the Endless.
Okay, well then.
This season.
Well, maybe.
Another reason why we have to get a season 2.
Exactly. But let's move on to a quick kind of jaunt over to the realm of Dream, because we do get the librarian and Dream himself kind of discussing what's next. And kind of like, obviously we get this fantastic kind of quick scene with just the stained glass representing what they're talking about. We see that there have been, or there is, based on the audit by the librarian, there are 3 missing arcana from the Dream.
3 very important members of the Dreaming, I suppose, that are gone missing here. We all already knew, of course, about the Corinthian, because we've been following Corinthian since the beginning of the season. We know Corinthian has been gone, but 2 more mentioned here, Galt and Fiddler's Green.
Yes. Although Galt is a nightmare.
Yes.
There's another nightmare like the Corinthian, but Fiddler's Green, I have no idea what words that Morpheus said or what they meant, but is a vavasor of his own dominion.
Yes.
And really shouldn't be playing away from home. Like,
it doesn't need to play away from home, is kind of the point. Yes.
Yes, that's the one I'm most intrigued about as well.
It looked a bit like a landscape, didn't it? Or a park.
A golf course, if you will.
Yeah.
A green.
Or a green, yes.
But I did like how they got represented in the stained glass. I thought that was pretty cool. And of course, all coming on the back of Lucian conducting a census of the dreams and nightmares that have returned, because like the dream realm is looking pretty spick and span now.
And there's over 11,000 different entities there now as well, so we're back. It's effectively only 3 entities that are missing, which was to be expected, but they're 3 quite powerful entities.
But Dream has fluttered his eyelashes and everything is sort of spick and span, I guess.
Well, there was a month in between when he got all of his stuff back, and then he met his sister, and obviously a little bit more time has passed here again, to the point that now I love that establishing shot where it comes into the castle of Dream, I guess, his central home, and how beautiful it looks again now after seeing it back in episode 4 and 5, the destruction that had happened to it. So that's all back to full power.
I did feel as though the bridge was different than before. So how the boats can actually travel under it, I don't know now. Because it didn't look like it had the hands to raise up the bridge. But maybe they're submerged now. Maybe it's just still to be revealed.
Well, the land of the dreaming changes often. It's not. It's not a static. It's not the static look. He does change it up quite a bit. So that's part of it. But
kind of like the IKEA seasons.
Something like that, yeah. He's like, if you had the ability to create anything out of your mind, would you create the same thing over and over again, or would you just mess about with it a little bit?
Exactly.
Maybe he found that he could have a different mechanism other than massive hands lifting off the bridge. Maybe that's what it is.
Cool.
They were
massive
awesome.
hands are cool.
Yeah, they were awesome.
Do you want a mound today with your bookcase? Would you like a Svorgadorik? Yeah, no, it's gonna.
That was IKEA. I was wondering what the heck that was, Chris.
Moundless Svorgadorik, a Herteberger.
Right.
I was going into the kitchen version of
close to the Swedish chef there, Krista.
Yes, thank you. This is interesting because it does also lead us to the vortex. The idea of a dreamer who is so powerful that they suck in all elements of the dream escape, including Lord Morpheus himself. Yeah. Potentially. So this is fun. This is where one of the bits I really enjoyed about the whole aspect of the Sandman in the comic books was there was these little stories that were told years ago or months ago in the comic books that get threaded through all the way to, and you're reading and going, oh my god, this person's connected to this person? Ah! Exactly. Yeah. So here we do see and are introduced to a connecting character of Rose.
Yes, Rose Walker, the dream vortexes, as you mentioned. Interestingly, I kind of like how those points kind of connect together. Desire is the one that's saying they're going to use this vortex to get Morpheus, so it's the most powerful thing. It'll take Morpheus down. And then you get to Morpheus, he finds out about the dream vortex and has been monitoring her. You see it right at the opening of the episode. He's been monitoring Rose Walker, and he's going, I can use her to get those escaped arcana from the dreaming. I can use her to draw them to her, and then I can go and pick them up effectively. So he doesn't seem scared at all of the idea of that there's a new vortex in the world.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's kind of, as soon as I was sort of watched this episode, Rose Walker is almost a bit like the Scarlet Witch of the Sandman in some respects. She's this kind of nexus point of which, at least within the dream world. Yeah. She's really interesting because I love how, this is totally unknown to her. And yet I love how through this episode there are these series of moments where, she's like dreaming about the amulet and then receiving one from Unity Kincaid. Yes. Just the final one where she's in the hall of the Dream Palace with Lucien and Morpheus, talking about her brother. So I like that. And I'm really intrigued, that with her brother Jed, because he can't be found in the waking world or the dream world, and this disconnection from one of the arcana, gold, possibly, has severed that connection. I really, it's just, it is this kind of like a yin and yang thing where he is also has some kind of power, but because he can't be seen, I don't know, or is it just a function of the Nightmare Galt and so on? But is there any meaning to this? Because Rose is fully visible here and has significant powers in this realm.
Seems like
or potential consequences for this realm.
Yeah.
And then Jed is all but absent.
Exactly. Yeah. And it seems like the reason why they went after Jed is because she is the vortex, so they've gone after her brother, effectively. So not that he has any specific power that we know of anyway. We'll see a little bit more of him as the episodes go on, but it seems they've gone after him almost to get to Rose, or because they're being pulled towards Rose, they've picked up on Jed. That's what it seems like. But again, that story is to be told in a future episode. Let's talk quickly about Unity Kincaid here, because kind of what you mentioned earlier on, Chris, this is one of the cool things about Sandman. How something dropped in an early issue comes back and becomes massively important. Here with Unity Kincaid, we saw when when Morpheus was kidnapped by Roderick Burgess in the first episode, we saw that hundreds of thousands of people fell to an illness called encephalitis lethargica, where they were asleep for many years, and nobody could understand it, nobody explained it. A true disease, in fact, something that did actually happen in the 20s, where people fell asleep and nobody knew what happened to them. And Unity Kincaid is one of those people who's been asleep for the last 80 years, or 100 years, excuse me, because that's, she only awoke when Dream came back from his capture. So she's only been awake for 8 months now, which is really interesting. So I love that that's almost throwaway. It was just, what are the consequences of removing Morpheus from the world? The consequences are you have people like Unity Kincaid who fell asleep on their 12th birthday and then don't wake up for 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, I liked how Unity Kincaid said how she lived her life in the dreams. I guess it was slightly, I don't know whether it was meant to be, but it was almost that slightly disturbing notion that she became pregnant, whilst asleep, so kind of, what's the hospital orderly been doing effectively?
So they brush over that.
Well, exactly. They do a bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They brushed over it, and I was expecting a quick sidebar or like some acknowledgement.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose when you then get into trigger warnings about rape and abuse and all that type of storyline, and like maybe it comes up later, and maybe they do sort that piece out as a flashback. But yeah, that was kind of like, oh yes, I'm your granny.
Yeah, I think it was even the reaction of Rose Walker and Lyta. I mean, it was kind of the absence of any kind of reaction about that. I mean, so I thought that was a little odd, but I like the notion though that there is this connection, because I mean she does say I was then thinking, but because she said, in my dream I lived a full life, I had a baby, when I woke up the only thing that was actually real was that I had a baby. So having that daughter. So then I started to think, well, we've got realms here. We're in the land of the endless with angels and so on. So is there some kind of immaculate conception element here as well, with not having read the comics?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like I was thinking, oh, maybe that's why or something. But nonetheless, you would still think there would be some form of reaction, even if it was just kind of a knowing glance between Rose and Lyta when that was said.
Right.
Rather than suddenly saying something to Unity, I guess.
I suppose I kind of take it that they're not going to go into that, because if you think about what's happened to Unity herself, she was 12 years old. She had a family, very rich, very wealthy family.
Yeah. And
then 100 years later, she wakes up and realizes all the things that she's experienced were all a dream. None of that happened. Yet she's entitled to all this wealth that was built up by her family. She's very, very rich, but has no connection to anything at all. And is now, I guess over 100 here, because she said she went into the sleep when she was 12, and we know Morpheus was captured for 100 years, so I guess she's about 112, or plus 8 months. But she's spent the last 8 months trying to find connection with family, and the conversation she has with Rose is, I didn't want to tell you on the phone, because if you turned your back to me when you heard the story, I couldn't have taken that. So if she explained it in all its gory detail as somebody had sex with me while I was asleep, and you're the product of that union, maybe she felt I would be driving Rose away, so she didn't explain it in that way. And Rose didn't react because, exactly as Lyta said on the flight over, Rose has just lost her mother, she can't find her brother, her father's gone dead as well. She's all alone in the world, and suddenly she's found this connection to her great-grandmother, thinking that she was all alone in the world. So I think that the reason why they avoid that is because that's the connection you're supposed to be really focusing on, is that there is this family coming together for the first time.
Agreed. And I mean, there is a lot going on with Rose Walker. As you say, it's not only that she's trying to find Jed, she's just lost her mum. Her father, her estranged father, is also dead.
Yeah.
She doesn't have a job. She's been invited over here. This bombshell, strange things happening to her where she feels she's living her dreams, I guess, to some extent. So there's a huge amount going on here. And I think to introduce something like that, it's, as I say, I don't even think it needs to be explained, but it was even just some kind of like strange glance between Lyta and Rose, like not to upset Unity, but just between them sort of knowingly, or some kind of conversation once they were back in Florida about, just something, because it did feel a little odd that something of that magnitude, even with everything else going on, did get brushed aside,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
But that's just me. But I love the story of Unity Kincaid. I love that she is connected to Rose and her mother and to Jed as well. And I love how that, as you say, because she has effectively missed her life, but has these connections and is hugely wealthy with probably very little time to spend it because she's in a nursing home.
Yeah.
That she is sort of trying to live all that real world time in a condensed period. So I really like that, just that notion of what she's doing, because she's immensely wealthy and she knows she has family. I like that she helps and offers to help Rose as well to find Jed, who is effectively her great grandson as well. So it's just really, really good.
Yeah. She's pretty spry as well for 112.
Yeah, she is.
It'd be interesting to see. I think they may address that, hopefully, kind of like that once, because they've been dreaming, they haven't aged as much, etc., etc., etc.
Well, I was wondering about that. I wonder if, because she was fast asleep, I know she didn't have the pouch of sand or anything around there, but whether some kind of just regenerative nature of that.
Well, sleep, it does help restore you.
Well, that is true.
It does, but unfortunately, a lot of people who had encephalitis lethargica did die after 20 or 30 years within, or less, 10 or 12 years. Not a huge amount of cases where they lasted for 100 years. And in the comic book, slight difference because the comics were from 1989 and Dream was captured in 1917. It's only 82 years, so a little bit more believable that a 10-year-old would still be alive. So we're not gonna push it too hard. She was about 90 in the comic books. She's now 112, which is old for anybody. So we'll let them away with it because they have to tell that story, right?
Yeah, exactly. But that does lead to, that whole encounter does lead to Rose and Lyta heading to Florida to track down her brother, and we do get the doll's house,
the new cast,
the B&B.
Yes. I really like this set of characters. I like how they're all introduced. Again, all straight from the comic books. I like how they're all introduced, but I love that opening with Hal because he's so welcoming to Rose. You feel like they're old friends. Yeah. And Rose has lived in the house before. He opens up his arms and is welcome home to her, and they have a conversation as if they've known each other for years, even Lyta pointing it out, going, when did you meet him? It's like, oh no, I just met him on the phone. I called him up and I booked the place, and she's moving into a new home. It doesn't feel like a B&B. And when you go round the cast of characters that are in this home, that are in this bed and breakfast, they sound like they've all lived there for years. We have Barbie and Ken, the hilariously named couple. They know it's weird, but they are there until they can find a place to live, until they can buy their own home together. We have the spider hoarding or spider loving, siblings, lovers, mother and daughter, Zelda and Chantal, who are so interesting. They look like something out of Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
They're great. But again, all very friendly, all really welcoming. It's like Hal has set up this place that you're part of the family once you come in.
Well, as they say, one big, odd, happy family, which was, and I loved all these characters just from their introduction. So I'm really looking forward to kind of I guess, finding more out about them or see how they weave into the story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and there's Gilbert up in the attic as well.
Yes, there is.
Who's the bookworm. And we see him later helping Rose, who's sort of being mugged in the alleyway outside of where you get Hal's performance. So I loved all this. It was just really very cool to me. I kind of got drawn to it. And, I recognised Ken as well. I think he used to be in Coronation Street.
Interesting.
Strangely enough.
Interesting.
And anything that has Ken and Barbie in it has to be hilariously good.
Beyond Ken and Barbie, anything that has Stephen Fry in it has to be good.
Well,
Gilbert
absolutely.
Himself, I'm like, yes, I'm here for it. Give me all of it.
Absolutely. He's such a great actor. He's been in so many interesting roles over the years, from back in TV when he had his own comedy shows to Blackadder. And then we were watching The Hobbit this weekend after watching Lord of the Rings, The Ring of Power. And he's quite a central character in The Hobbit as well. So interesting to see him in all these different roles over the years. But he's just got such a friendly persona when he comes and speaks to Rose. But he also comes across as really chivalrous. He's there to help, but only if she wants help. So she has it handled. So he just shows off his sword from his cane, and then that's enough to drive off the muggers.
Complete aside, I do want a sword cane when I'm older.
My
I'm
granddad
gonna
had
be
one.
that guy. I'm gonna have to be, because I'm gonna end up having some form of walking stick because they just look cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just upgrade it to a cane, and then the only way to upgrade it beyond that is to put a sword in it and just be that crazy old man. Like, I think I can pull it off. I'm not quite sure. Especially if I'm singing with a sword cane. If I'm the singing crazy old man.
What's the
with a
laws
sword
around
cane.
that, though?
Yeah.
I mean, is that a concealed weapon, which must be illegal?
Potentially, but if it's made out of, like,
What?
bamboo, and then it's
So
just
you'll
like, it's just my walking stick.
No,
It's
not
just
the
like-
sword. The cane is made out of bamboo.
Well, I know,
the
but
sword's metal.
I know, but that's what's concealed.
Yes.
It's
yes.
It's not a sword with a cane in it. It's a cane with a sword in it. So that's what I mean. If Chris is going to have a length of bamboo to whip any attackers, spank them away.
There you go.
Yes. Anyway, back on to one thing I did want to call, and I'm interested to see if they stick. I don't know whether they're sticking with the comic books or not, but we do get told back that one of the missing arcana is Galt, and Galt is a shape changer.
Mm-hmm.
So we do know that poor little Rose is a vortex and pulls all of the dreaming folk to her. So I'm like, now my radar is kind of going, who's going to be the one and only Galt?
Mm-hmm.
It would be fun to see how that expands, because we do get the Fates introduced again straight away. And they do then pull in the discussion, which allows then Rose to take that first discussion directly to the man themselves.
Yeah, it's an interesting one with the Fates here, isn't it? Because the last time we saw them, effectively they were brought in to the women that John had killed, all came to life and told him about his future.
Yes.
And then before that, Morpheus went and visited them because he had specific questions. But I believe even John actually called out to the Fates to ask for his future, and that's why they were called there. Whereas here, it is just after Rose finds out that Unity is her great-grandmother, and the Fates arrive to... I do love them again, of course, because they have that duplicitousness of their way of talking, where they're there to warn her, but only if she asks the right questions. They're there to give her help finding her brother, but she didn't ask the right questions.
Yeah.
So they're there to tell her that they know everything and then disappear.
But I mean, they do caution her against, so that they say against dreams and houses.
Yes.
And name called the Corinthian and Morpheus.
Yes.
As a caution to it. So I thought that was really interesting. The Corinthian, I can understand, but maybe even Morpheus's plans to effectively use her without telling her to pull in the Corinthian, but also the other missing arcana, that's the caution that you'll be used by him. So I thought that was really kind of quite neat, and I also just like the whole setup where she ends up being in a utility cupboard. And Lyta going, "What are you doing?" And just putting it down to the jet lag. I just like that kind of end to it. How it, it was just nicely done.
Yeah, it's very cool.
I think the other thing I really liked as well, as I was saying, so that Morpheus and Lucien know what Rose Walker is doing in the real world, in the waking world. That they send Matthew. So it was great getting Matthew back as well in this episode. But I absolutely adored how he moved from the dream world into the waking world by going through the sort of fresco painting on the ceiling. It's just really, really nicely done.
It just kind of turns 3D as he flies through the clouds. Absolutely beautiful. And also getting some help from Merv Pumpkinhead. We finally get to meet Merv Pumpkinhead in the show, voiced by the wonderful Mark Hamill, from Star Wars or the Joker from, the Batman animated series and most, animated, Batman shows, but loads of other things as well. But really good to have Merv Pumpkinhead in there.
Like, I may have it was really good. Also, I may have just been reading or thinking too much about it, but it was just the notion of saying, with Matthew going to effectively spy on Rose in the real world, looking for shock or trauma that, as Lucien says, could kill us all.
Yeah.
I like that there's a real point that Matthew should report to Lucien first and not effectively to Morpheus. And I didn't quite know whether that was more significant than how it was delivered, in that, it's just hidden in there.
Yeah.
But I thought that was kind of an interesting point.
Yeah. So effectively, Morpheus knows that Matthew's going. He chose him to go because he can't see Rose when Rose isn't dreaming, but he's aware of it. But Lucien's not happy with the idea that he's going to use Rose to bring all of these arcana, possibly putting her at risk effectively. So that's why there's that discussion between Merv and Lucien, that they kind of don't like Morpheus's choice here. So if there's reports that come back from Matthew first to Lucien, then maybe she can do something about it and she can be in control of it. Now, that was proposed by Merv. It wasn't proposed by Lucien. So it wasn't her decision to do that, but she is kind of going, okay, maybe I can use this if I get the right information at the right time. I can make sure that Lord Morpheus's plan goes smoothly, let's say. That's what I'd say. Just remember, one of those cautions from the Fates is cautions on houses. She's just moved into a new house with loads of new people, but there's also the doll house itself, the name of the episode, connected to Unity Kincaid. So is she warning? Are the Fates warning her about Unity and her past or her connection, or are they warning her about all the people that are going to be in this house that she's going to go to?
Yes. Given, just as Chris mentioned, Galt being a shapeshifter, maybe one of them is a shapeshifter.
Maybe. Yes.
Maybe it's the house.
Maybe. Yeah.
That'd be...
With the dream, there is many different weird things.
Many possibilities. We've kind of already mentioned Rose coming in at the end to who's overhearing the whole conversation between Morpheus and Lucien. We haven't seen a human do that at all in the series so far. So Rose having that connection to be able to actually just walk in, and she was hearing those conversations earlier on as well when she fell asleep. So that's part of her vortex abilities, let's say. Anything else to add about Rose herself before we go on to the last couple of points?
No, not really.
Nothing but specifically, I think, with Rose, it's just, that was where I was like, oh, I want to move on to the next episode because I want to see how this meeting goes down.
Yes.
To what extent has Morpheus kind of connected or feels like he should connect with humans, given what we saw in episode 6 and the advice from his sister.
Yeah.
Because, at least around, episode 1 or 2, he would probably have done something to just send her back.
Potentially.
So that I'm just really intrigued about, really, to see how that follows on. But it was a great kind of, ending to the episode, or one of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, the other ending being we see Jed running away from his foster home, and being at this stage far down the road, and an auntie looking to help him, but his Uncle Barnaby looks like a bit of a tool, really, and is kind of, you wonder what his father was like, because, they foster him out following his death, but this sounds just, what was it, as he goes to get in the car when, he's been rumbled, he's been caught by Uncle Barnaby as he's trying to escape from their house, he goes to get in the front seat, and he goes, "No, you're riding in the back," and opens the boot. So, this seems pretty...
And takes out his shotgun.
Yeah,
which
this seems pretty
threatening.
Horrific for poor old Jed, to be honest. Is it just that Uncle Barnaby is pretty horrific? Is this Uncle Barnaby actually Galt, maybe, given they were the last person... that was the last dream or nightmare in Jed's case, to be recorded by Lucian and Morpheus, and that caused the severance of Jed's connection to the dream world. So you just wonder, because it's pretty horrendous for poor old Jed, to be honest. Yeah. In fact, the whole episode starts pretty horrifically and ends horrifically for Jed, effectively being separated from his sister, who, he loves, doesn't want to be separated from, but because of the divorce of the parents, and then effectively being put in the boot of his Uncle Barnaby's car. Which is weird, because it's definitely the car that the woman that picks him up and seemingly is going to take him to safety does call Auntie. She does seem genuinely afraid of Uncle Barnaby.
Yeah, but I'm not even sure whether they live together. Like, again, it's such a short scene. It's as if aunt and uncle have split, and Jed's trying to convince her to get away. But again, he does say, we can go anywhere, we can get away from Barnaby. So probably she was out looking for him and found him as well. But unfortunately, Barnaby found him and stuck him in the trunk of the car. Yeah. It's good to see. I want to see what happens for the rest of the season, because when we meet Jed in the comic books, it is in a much more difficult situation. Let's say it's pretty brutal, actually, where we see Jed for the first time, because the investigation as to where he is, you don't actually see much of Jed. You just see a couple of images that are in the mind of Rose and her memories of Jed, and then we meet Jed, and what's happened to him is all revealed quite quickly in the comic book. So this kind of cliffhanger here of his uncle being his possible uncle, they do actually call it out, don't they, that it's a family member of his father.
Yes.
So that's why the foster care system think he's okay, is because they've been collecting the money every month, and it's a family member of the father, so therefore he must be grand, he must be fine. But it turns out that he's in a pretty horrible situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What great due diligence from the American Social Services. Well, they've been collecting the money. You must be fine.
Yeah. Oh, and he was a relative, so that's fine. But even though Rose is a blood relative, his sister, she's not even allowed to see him or find out where he is.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah.
Bureaucracy, you gotta love it.
Absolutely.
Well, it's not even that. It's lack of. Because all they're saying is they collected the check. Tick. He's fine.
Yeah. But we'll see more. We'll see more of Jed in the future, and it's interesting story. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by it, actually.
One other character we really need to talk about here is Corinthian, who is on the trail of Rose, as well. As you mentioned, the vortex pulling all of these people towards them. So I love that he goes to Rose's apartment to offer her a job whirking for him.
Yeah, so does Carl.
Carl, I think, got a job there too. Yeah, for a little while.
Carl quite enjoyed the Corinthian turning up as well. Although a very lucky guy, very lucky not to have his soft, gooey eyes whipped out there.
you're right, though. Carl is really lucky. He even asks Corinthia to stay for longer, and because he has this message, he leaves pretty quickly. I wonder if he may have left his calling card with an eyeless Carl in the house. But then again, he does need to get in contact with Rose, so Carl's the one that's saying that he can get in contact with her.
Yeah, well,
but would you do that? I know Corinthian's an attractive guy, or at least Boyd Holbrook is a very attractive man who's come to Carl's door, and he seems to be taking the very definition of house sitting, because he looks like he hasn't left from when Rose went to the UK. But he goes, "Oh, she's gone for a week. You could come in and wait if you want to." For a week, a guy you've just met at the door.
I guess he was thinking that he would have a week of fun with the Corinthian, but I guess that would have sort of ended in total horror for him. To be honest, yeah, no, I thought that was a little odd, and I think he's a very lucky boy.
He is.
But I liked how the Corinthian, in order not to raise any suspicions, and I guess that's the other reason why he didn't take, as you say, the eyes out of Carl, was just saying how, he used to be in business with someone, broke away, and now he's looking for a partner because he believes that with Rose that he can put his former his former boss out of business. Yes. And I just thought, it's kind of a nice way of saying it.
Well worded.
And then sort of back to just then the collector's side of it.
Yes, let's talk about them.
I don't know, does it make me sick? But I really, really enjoyed the notion that in this dark underworld, even serial killers are trying to organize conventions or something, but it's just that, when the letter doesn't work, it's kind of, well, we need to do a copycat killing. And in the end, despite all three of them saying, well, we could annoy the Corinthian,
That's a bad
all
idea.
Three of them do it in order to get his attention, which they ultimately do. So, again, I guess another pretty boy is taken out as well. The waiter, alas, is not quite as lucky as Carl.
But I love how brutal it is and how fast it is. And
how matter of fact it is as well. From the lady, wasn't it?
I don't think it gives away much to give their actual names. They are slightly connected to what they do, but the good doctor is the lady, who's kind of leading the conversation and leads the charge. She literally recommends that they do a copycat killing. Nimrod and Funland are the two other, characters at the table.
I didn't get their names.
Yeah. They were just in the credits at the end of this episode. You'll get their proper names, later on in the series, but the good doctor literally just stands up and walks to the bathroom and takes the guy's eyes, and then they just walk out. It's so brutal, so cruel, but they're all serial killers, so they're probably used to having these kind of situations. So it's a very interesting story, and definitely one of my favorite bits of the comic book are these this idea of the convention.
Yeah, like that's the fun part. It's that everyone needs a friend, everyone has a hobby, but serial killers' hobby, they want to come together. Same way Dragon Con just ended, you have New York Comic Con, San Diego Comic Con, and then you have the Collector Con.
But you can't have a convention to meet up with each other unless you have your keynote speaker, and that has to be someone as big as the Corinthian.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the other thing with that, when the Corinthian arrives, I just loved how intimidating he was to them. They knew it was a risk, and in fact one of them was, we can't do copycat because we've got a code.
That's Nimrod,
and in the end all three of them do it. But I love how the Corinthian is so intimidating towards them, but then when they explain why they did it, his little line of, like-minded collectors with the same dreams. It's almost like he's building, a Death Star of similar dreamers in order to be able to take out Morpheus and to build that critical mass of the same dream and those connections, which I thought was, again, I just really liked that kind of concept of Corinthian using them ultimately, I guess, and being able to somehow bring Rose Walker into this to harness it in some way.
That's
I guess.
going to be his special guest. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Hopefully, they're better shots than stormtroopers. Because they're terrible in the Death Star.
Yes, they were.
They have not hit the target.
Maybe it'll take
in 9 films.
Or maybe all of them will take as long to warm up as the Death Star before it fires its single shot.
Maybe. And did you notice a little touch in here that Corinthian has actually achieved his purpose? If you remember back to basically the first moment of the first episode, Corinthian had gone to Earth, had escaped the dreaming to inspire other people to become serial killers, to develop his reputation and scare people in the real world, not just in nightmares, not just in dreams. And you hear a moment there with the 3 other killers at the table saying, this convention is full of serial killers, all inspired by you. Because he's been around for 120 years, everybody there has learned of the myth of the Corinthians. They think there's possibly 3 or 4 different people who've used it over the century, but they have all been inspired to be serial killers because of him, which I think is really interesting. Whether she was just buttering him up or giving him a compliment to get him on side or not, I like the idea that Corinthian may have been the first serial killer on the planet because he's an escaped nightmare, and everybody else who has become a serial killer has become it because of him, which is, I thought it was an interesting idea.
Yeah, that's not something I actually kind of thought of, so I think that's a really sort of good observation of what's happened here. And I guess with Rose Walker, with a mass of fellow collectors, then he has more power to be able to sort of unleash on Morpheus in some way.
Yeah.
It's going to be, for me, the kind of interesting thread of how they, or if they land the Corinthian and his storyline, because he is being set up as a big bad, but a big bad who actually has an unknown master, because we do know Desire and Despair, theoretically Desire, is pulling the strings to a degree. In the downfall of her brother.
Yeah. Not specifically to do with Corinthian, though.
Not specifically to Corinthian, but the Corinthian is essentially a bullet in a gun that is their machinations. So, potentially it's going to be what happens when the Corinthian finds out that his scheme, his plan to destroy Dream, potentially isn't his own.
Or to put it in the correct terminology, his desire to destroy Dream may not be his own desire, yes, or may have been inspired by somebody else. Yes, it'll be interesting how it plays out. And again, this is our second big arc of the show. First big arc was Sandman getting back his tools. Then a break for the moment where he discovers his connection with humans through the death storyline, and now we have the Doll's House story to the end of the season till episode 10 anyway, and then we have the 2 shorts that we'll be talking about. Any notes about the episode? Anything else about the episode you guys want to talk about before we go on to some feedback?
Nothing major for me. Very much just really want to dive into the next kind of couple of episodes because it's. As much as I used to love this format of one a week, when I know there's more and I know it's right there, I'm like, can we just like binge watch?
I know.
Yes, you can. You can go ahead, binge watch all the episodes, and we'll come back and talk about episode 8 next time. I just wanted to call out one major lovely touch. Again, things coming back from earlier episodes. There's a photo of Judy, who we saw in the diner in 24/7, who died at the hands, let's say, of John Dee, who died because of John Dee. There's a photograph of her in Rose's apartment that the Corinthian stops and looks at. It's very clear. So Judy, the character who had called Rose from the diner and is now missing, there's a photograph of her in Rose's apartment. So just connecting those. So I'd mentioned back in that episode when we had the phone call with Rose Walker, she would be an important character in the future. So they've connected the 2 episodes together in that way, which I thought was quite a nice little touch.
Yes.
Excellent stuff.
Good catch.
So then, what are your overall thoughts of Chapter 7, The Doll's House, Derek?
I like this one. It's a weird one. This is the volume I think I've read most often, even though it's not my favorite story within the series. Purely because that was the first bound volume that I got. I think was volume 2 of the stories of this story of the Doll's House. So I've read this really, really often. There's lots of changes to it from the comic book, but this is the first issue. This is the opening of it, and I think what they're depending on Netflix is you've got the whole thing there to watch. By episode 6, you should be in on the characters and you should be in on the concept of what is here in the Sandman. And now we're going to tell you a new story with a whole raft of new people, being introduced here. There's like 10 new characters, I think, in this episode alone. And you're going to go on to the next episode. So the only kind of criticism I'd have would be as a standalone episode, it doesn't work as well as we've seen 2 standalone episodes back to back. But what could? Those 2 episodes were some of the best TV that we've seen, separate to anything else that we've discussed. So it's an impossible task to have every single episode be a 5 out of 5 or a 10 out of 10. This episode is a big setup episode for the rest of the series. So it accomplishes its job really well, but I wouldn't watch this episode on its own in the future. I'd watch this and then the next episode and the next and the next. I'd probably watch it as a bundle, to get to the end of the series rather than just picking it out and watching it. Whereas something like episode 6, I've already watched more times than any of the other episodes. So, and we'll watch that again. So I really liked it, but it's a setup episode, which has to happen when you're trying to tell a big long arc. Excellent.
John, what did you think of this episode, Doll's House?
Yeah, I really liked it. I would give it 4 collector conventions out of 5. I think it's the same point that Derek's raised, and I know didn't really mention it during our discussions, but given what it's followed in episodes 6 and 5, this almost seemed, it feels like it's not as good in a sense, but that's because it's got a different job to do.
Yeah.
Because it's a whole new arc, and I think, yes, as a pure standalone, it introduces an awful lot. So this is a lot of introduction again. It's like coming back to season 1. I mean, in many respects, a 6-episode season is a usual BBC drama series run. So, in that sense, I have no problem with almost starting again at the start of season 2, pretty much in that sense. So I think, it's just coming off the back of that. You notice it. And I think then, because those last 2 and, or last 3 are well into the stride of that storyline. So, whereas this is kicking off again, but I like the connections that it makes back, whether it is through the photo of Judy, as you mentioned, but also with Unity Kincaid, and seeing her begin her sleeping sickness back there in episode 1 or 2. So, there are those threads through, and having the Corinthian here as well. It's connected for sure, but there's a lot of new setup. But I really like that. I loved Hal and his bed and breakfast with all the residents there. I want to get to know them more. I'm really wanting to see Rose Walker and Morpheus effectively chat in his palace. I want to see how that sort of meeting takes place. I want to, dare I say it, get to the convention and see what happens there. Is there strange things that happen? What do they sell? Is it sharpened tools for use? Is their sponsor a local pie shop that you can put stuff into to dispose of the bodies, or crematoriums or whatever? So I'm really interested in that, and I want to see how this vortex starts to spiral. And I think primarily for me, I actually want to see more of Desire. I'm loving the character, and so far they've only been on screen quite in small doses. And I want to have a big dose of Desire.
Excellent.
So 4 collector conventions out of 5. Christoph, what did you think overall for Chapter 7, The Doll's House?
I loved it. But everything you both have mentioned rings 100% true. The reason I loved it is this could have been at the beginning of the season. It's essentially the act 2 of the 2-act play, with the encore being, now we know, episode 11. So again, introduction of all the characters and a new intrigue, playing on that you know who some of these characters are and what they are. So I loved the original in the comic books. More slightly different from what Derek was, where he said it was like your first collected volume. For me, it was just, I think I started and stopped and got up to this point a few times.
Right.
Remember I had mentioned that I kind of, throughout my years trying to read it, I always got to kind of around this area, and then for whatever reason it fell off. When I kind of blasted through, this still became one of my kind of favorite, just based on the wackiness and the weirdness, and very much collectors. Because I'm so intrigued by the thought of a collector convention, if you will.
You just love all types of conventions, Chris.
I do, but not post-COVID. Conventions for me, but especially a collector convention, double A. So look, absolutely loved it, and it seems like some of our other fellow dreamers also enjoyed it, because we've got feedback on Chapter 6 and Chapter 7 to go through. If you'd like to hear your thoughts on our podcast, make sure you head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com, where you can record us a voicemail. Additionally, you can send us your thoughts to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com, or you can join us on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. And each and every post and every episode has a post, and you can leave us your thoughts there, and we will read them out on our recordings. Yes, much like Donald Dennis, who had this to say about Chapter 6. This was an amazing episode, and they combined two of my favourite early stories. Even though I was sort of looking forward to the goth death of the original novel, I am super amazed with the actress they got to play Death in the series. She did a great job, and I loved her portrayal. Yes. Well, she just did a different version of goth death. That was it.
But she also had that joy about her. Kirby Baptiste just really had that presence about her on screen that worked so well for Death.
Definitely.
You know, really, really good. Excellent stuff, Donald. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Donald.
Tina Brown says, as a huge fan of the comics, I admit that the day this dropped, I watched about 20 minutes of the first episode before I couldn't bear it anymore. I skipped to this episode because I had to see it realized. I had to see Death throw the bread at Dream. I couldn't wait. One Easter egg I loved in the episode was in Harry's apartment, the room Dream wanders into, I guess his bedroom. There is the framed photo of Harry with the other musicians, but next to it is a picture of Peter Pan with his flute. Famously, Peter said that to die would be an awfully big adventure. Love that touch. That's really fascinating. That's a great little Easter egg there, Tina.
Yeah,
I didn't even notice that. Thank you.
Good catch.
Didn't notice that at all. Thanks, Tina. On to Chapter 7 feedback. Robert Williams sent an email into us at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. Robert says, the plot thickens. Hello again, Derek, John and Chris. Couple of thoughts. First, thanks again for the podcast, and I hope you guys are doing well over in Ireland. Why, thank you, Robert. Well, I'm doing well, certainly.
Me too. Lots of great TV to watch.
And Chris, are you as well?
I'm sure.
Well, he's looking okay, yes. Robert. Yes. He's looking okay over the Zoom. He's looking okay.
Lots of good TV and getting to chat with friends. That's always good, right?
Exactly.
Yes, that's all we need.
Thank you, Robert, for listening to us and asking about us. Second, Robert says, it seems this season seems to be encompassing multiple story arcs in one season, similar to shows like The Witcher. And this episode seems to be kicking off a whole new story arc. I'm enjoying this storytelling, but in the comics, do these stories tie together at some point, or, like The Witcher, is each arc meant to grow the main characters in the grand story of the main protagonist? Does this make sense? Hopefully so. Last thought, the collectors. Does each realm have them? I'm sure you will discuss in the podcast, but curious about what they do for the comics and storyline. Thanks again, and cheers, Robert. Yeah, thanks, Robert. I'm guessing that given that I haven't read the comics, but knowing comics quite well, I guess, is that this is a grand story of the main protagonist.
Kind of.
And they all link into that for sure. And there are threads that run through it. But I think you can also pop in and out of those different arcs as well. It's kind of like, I guess, it's like an event.
Kind of. I suppose one of the most interesting pieces that I heard about this production, and one of the things that's always been really challenging to bring Sandman to the screen, is that everybody that has been trying to do all the failed versions of Sandman tried to make Morpheus the protagonist of the story. And this is a story about stories. This is a story that has Morpheus in the background, a lot of it. He is there, as we saw in this episode. He had about 3 minutes of screen time in the show called The Sandman. That kind of character, that kind of use of him continues throughout the show. We don't see him all the time. It's not all about his story. It's about how he's interacting with the world, of course, but most of the characters get their own arcs. The people that we meet, like Rose Walker here, is getting a 4-episode arc in the TV show. She's now effectively the star of these next 4 episodes. I think that would be, that's a guess. Not spoiling anything, I hope. But that's how Gaiman wrote his book. He built the premise, set up the stage, and now everybody plays on that stage that comes in and out of the comic books. So part of the reason why it's massively expensive as a show is because there's about 100 people in the cast of this show, all coming in for individual episodes and individual arcs as well. So yes, it's a different type of comic book. As we've always said, it's part of the reason why people love it so much, is because you never know what you're going to get. You could be in the 1400s one week. You could be dealing with a house in Florida the next week. You could be all over the place. Different.
So what you're saying is my guess was completely wrong.
Your guess was what you'd expect. Yes, I understand that. I understand that. At the moment, we're only in the first season of the show, but we will see more.
You could have let me down more gently, Derek.
Did I not do that? Well, I'm sorry.
Very much that there is no protagonist. The protagonist is the story, is the characters in the story. But it's about how they interact with each other and the world of the dreaming and the endless. But there is no singular. It's not even. It goes beyond being an ensemble, because I know ensemble. You could say, oh, well, that's what it like narratively would be. Yeah. Not even that. It's not like Friends. There was no singular protagonist in Friends, and it was the ensemble. It's beyond that. So,
but there are some more protagonistic than others, I guess.
Yes. Okay, fine.
And certainly, as we said before, in this show, having Corinthian on one side as an antagonist and Morpheus on the other side as a protagonist, so far in the season, it does feel like they were going for the big bad versus the big good. That's going to start to drop away a little bit more as this arc of the show goes on.
Yeah, and okay, Grant. And another point that Robert makes, and again, I will have a stab at it, but you can tell me I'm wrong. So that's an interesting point that you've raised, Robert, about the collectors. Does each realm have them? I think how it's been discussed is that these collectors are in the waking world, in the real world, having been inspired by the Corinthians, so they're not coming from other realms, like the Corinthian in that sense.
They're just serial killers.
Yes,
they're just serial killers that
bog
name
standards serial
as
killers,
collectors, because you can't really kind of call yourself a serial killer.
Yeah.
Well, you could, but you'd be found pretty quickly.
But
you find your next victim if you call yourself a serial killer in public, right?
Yes.
So,
But I like that idea that Robert's raised, in that does Desire have all the desires, good and bad, floating around in their realm that go off, and are some kind of, the desire not to have a boss. They go, well, I don't want to be with you, Desire. And off I go, causing mayhem and trouble. I mean, I'm just, is it just the uniqueness of the dream realm with all these huge array of different dreams and nightmares within the realm. So actually, Morpheus has a much more difficult job than Desire does, because Desire can stay in her kind of swanky modern apartment,
inside her own heart of her statue.
Whereas he's got to actually run a society of dreams and nightmares that are wanting to do their own thing. I mean, he's even got Lucian, a secretary in that sense, a PA or whatever.
A librarian, Tom.
No, yeah, exactly. But to manage all the different things, whereas Desire seems like they just need a tablet.
Well, Desire is Desire. And Despair is Despair, and Morpheus is the Lord of the Dreaming Realm. So they are very different as members of the Endless. So his part of his role is creating dreams and nightmares. That's part of his role. Whereas Desire wouldn't create a personification of a desire. They would inspire someone to desire something, or inspire them to not desire something, I guess would be the way you'd say it. Yeah.
But she says they're echoes of dreams. So, I mean, look, as I say, I just find that really interesting. Does Despair have something else? It's not even just multiple different things, but so I thought I still think that's a really kind of interesting notion that
it
Robert brings up.
And I don't really want to talk more about the collectors, because that's something that you will see in the show.
Okay.
Who they are and what they are, we'll see more of in the show. But right now, serial killers.
Excellent stuff. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Robert.
Yeah.
Yep, thanks, Robert. Over on Facebook, Dr. Bob Phillips had this to say: could they have been any different from the beauty of death and friendship to fan-run murderventions?
Nice.
Quite sure I do not want to know more about Family Guy. To an explosion of quirky folks living their best lives, if you'd include Dreamed Life in that too. I did like the way the horrific origins of Rogue's grandma was skipped over. No Kill Bill here. And I love the idea of a house being sentient. Is Fiddler Green actually a landscape come to life?
No comment.
Thanks, Dr. Bob. Very interesting theories. I think we all agree that, yes, this is completely two very different episodes, going from 6 to 7. On your final question about Fiddler's Green, John, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great little theory that Fiddler's Green, because the stained glass, it was kind of a landscape, as you say, Dr. Bob. So I'm just wondering whether Hal's B&B, with its tended lawns and so on, just that landscape of around the B&B is somehow this Vavassor, it's of his own dominion, that there's some kind of dominion of Hal's B&B. I don't know.
Could be.
I just wondered, that idea of them, that house being sentient.
Yep. That or Fiddler's Green is a golf course, and actually is the actual, the spirit, the dream of a golfer. We will see.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Bob. I have absolutely no comment on who Fiddler's Green is or what Fiddler's Green might be. We'll see that in a later episode. Lara Willie Shrinks says, after Dream's day on the job with Big Sister Death, we are on to the doll's house. I was curious to see how Desire and especially Despair would be depicted, and they both played excellently on the screen. Mason Alexander Park absolutely was Desire, voice and all, and a dowdy oversized sweater and Crocs maybe expresses Despair much more than a hunched and naked woman. I was a little disappointed that they let the cat out of the bag a bit early on the killer convention. It was much more fun to be stunned by the reveal of a serial convention that had nothing to do with Frosted Flakes. Ooh, interesting spoilers for what's coming up in the comic books there, but nothing too bad, I don't think.
No, I think we're okay with spoiler territory. Thanks, Lara. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So I'm going to have to read the comics now. Damn it.
I've been trying to convince you for 15 years, John. You will get there. By the time we get to episode 11, you'll definitely want to read
I credit Lara for getting me to read the comics.
I can't believe it, but that's fine. Lara's been inspiring people to read these comics for a long time, from my understanding. I absolutely love your point about despair and her having a daddy oversized sweater and Crocs being our new version of what despair looks like on a person.
Yeah, I'm just like, when did Crocs get so much hate? I don't know. I missed that news flash.
I think if you wear them as your primary shoes when you're sitting around on a couch all day, maybe that's where they get the despair.
It's valid despair and hate. If you're wearing Crocs, you should be despised.
Not at all. You wear whatever you want to, especially if you're listening to our podcast.
Yes, but just not Crocs. Not Crocs. They're fashion.
Yeah, it's like, when did people stop wearing jeans? It was all tracksuits.
Oh, well, yeah, when tracksuits became cheaper than jeans.
Well, I guess.
Anyway, thanks everybody for your feedback. Great to hear from you. I hope you're enjoying following along with us on The Sandman. 4 more episodes to go. Looking forward to getting into episode 8 next time.
Yes, it's gonna be good. If you've enjoyed what you heard, make sure you subscribe to the podcast by heading on over to tvpodcastindustries.com and making sure you've clicked all of the links. Don't forget, you can also support the podcast to help us build our Dollhouse collection by heading on over to patreon.com/tvpodcastindustries. And there, you can support us for any monthly amount ongoing. But if you just want to give us a one-off donation to the Dollhouse of our dreams, you can head on over to buymeacoffee.com/tvpi. With that, gentlemen, it is time for us to go to the ethereal dreamscape that is Florida. And we will be back next time for our discussion of the Sandman Chapter 8, Playing House.
Absolutely. Covering loads more stuff as well. At the moment, we're covering She-Hulk Attorney at Law from Marvel on Disney+. We're also have just started our podcast on Lord of the Rings of Power over on Prime Video. 24 million people watched those first 2 episodes in the first 24 hours they were out. So lots of people have watched them. Come join us for our chat. Myself and John had a great chat about the first 2 episodes.
Yeah, really enjoyed them.
But thanks for joining us. Hope you join us again soon.
Yes, thank you so much. 3 very different shows. We hope you will enjoy each and every single one, and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye.
Yes, thank you so much, fellow dreamers, for joining us for The Sandman Chapter 7. We'll catch you again next time. But before then, keep watching, keep listening, and keep dreaming. Bye.
Bye.